You ever notice how politics loves to argue about everything except the stuff people actually feel in their wallet, their rent, their healthcare bill, and the why is my grocery total a hate crime moment at the checkout? Because in Indiana State Senate District 15, up in northeast Fort Wayne and out toward Huntertown, the big questions aren't theoretical. They're simple and sharp. Can you afford to live here? Can you get in to see a doctor? Can you raise a family without feeling like the state is grading you on a curve you never agreed to? Tonight, we're talking to a candidate who says Indiana is overpriced and underpaid, and who wants to change what the state house thinks it's for. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Hold 'em Accountable. I'm Derek, and today we got an interview focused on Indiana State Senate District 15, which covers portions of Allen County, including Northeast, Fort Wayne, and Huntertown. My guest is Chloe Andis, a candidate for Indiana State Senate who describes herself as a veteran, strategist, and a proud Hoosier. Her campaign bio highlights a background in the national security and intelligence community and other mission focused roles. And she frames that experience as strategic problem solving. And now she wants to bring home to state government. On the issues, her platform emphasizes affordability and quality of life basics, housing costs, wages, health care access, and childcare, alongside civil and personal freedoms. And this race matters. This is one of the most important opportunities Indiana Democrats have to unseat Senator Liz Brown. Let me say that again. This seat is against Liz Brown and change the direction of District 15 and probably the state for years. This seat has been treated as safe and settled, even as Northeast Fort Wayne and Huntertown have changed. Tonight, we're talking about why this district deserves new leadership and what's on the line if it doesn't get it. Chloe, thank you so very much for being here.
Derek, thank you. I'm so excited to be part of this and talk about exactly what you're framing. District 15, the state house impacts to my people in my community and to our communities.
So let's start here. Senate District 15 stretches from suburban Fort Wayne neighborhoods into rapidly growing Huntertown.
hmm
How do you plan to represent both established urban communities and fast expanding suburban areas without one being left behind?
Yeah, it's a great framing because you have two areas that I think are considered different. Spent time in both. And as it's almost like raising kids, right? You shouldn't see them as competing interests. They're parts of the same system. It's like raising a toddler while also raising a teenager. It's that care needs to be tailored in equity rather than equality. And so I think what we're seeing out of Huntertown is massive growth. It's visible growth, right? You have a population increase that is stressing the true infrastructure of Huntertown, from the roads to the schools to the utilities to emergency services. And I I've seen it personally. I grew up here. I went through NAX, graduated from Carroll, and one of the jobs that I had during that time in high school was I actually used to deliver newspapers for the Journal Gazette. And my district, my little area, was basically up Lima all the way through Huntertown and up to the county line. And so what I've seen since having moved back after my service is it does not look the same as when I went through high school and back in 2011. We've Huntertown has just expanded, and I think that's an incredible investment into District 15, into Northeast Indiana, but we have to take care of that. Counter Huntertown with the Fort Wayne neighborhoods feeling disinvested, feeling the cost pressures, um, while subsidizing the sprawl, right? And so both of these different children, if you will, are impacted by state house decisions. State house decisions made by people that don't live here, that haven't gone through NACS, that have never worked with Parkview, that haven't worked on the back of the ambulances with TRA. And I think we've seen that, especially this session, from Liz Brown and other representatives that impact Northeast Indiana, Fort Wayne, and Huntertown. And so I truthfully don't think the failure here is the divide between the rapidly growing rural slash suburban Huntertown versus Fort Wayne's suburban slash urban populace. But the state house treats both like a free lunch instead of developing it and planning for that development as something that needs long-term caring and long-term planning. My job is to make sure that that growth is actually invested in with reality. So that means tailoring those services to Huntertown, tailoring the services to Fort Wayne, and communicating why that looks different in that equity rather than equality, and build a sense of community across these lines of division that I think superficially exist because we've treated it this way from the state house down to local government. And so the infrastructure I think that has been stressed is because we haven't followed that population growth, right? And so what we need to do is actually tailor it to the historical growth and to the anticipated growth that we're seeing through Huntertown. Um, what does that mean? It means investing in our roads. It means investing in the schools through Northwest Allen County. The more neighborhoods that we have, the more kids that we have, the more teachers that we need, and we need to make sure that we're doing the due diligence from the state house and discovering exactly where that bottleneck, where the highest pressure of that squeeze exists, so that we can expand it. Is it the teachers? Is it the schools? Is it roads? Is it emergency services? Is it utility extensions and expansion beyond, like, out to the county line? I don't know yet. And I need to have those conversations with people that actually live in Huntertown to truthfully understand that. And so as we think about this split, this system where we have Huntertown and Allen County, it's not about picking a side. It's about making sure that one isn't left holding the bag for the other.
How does the state manage the infrastructure needs that are coming because Huntertown is expanding so rapidly? Like
Mhm.
the roads, the schools, utilities. How does the state, that take care of it so it doesn't outpace quality of life?
We need to have actual legislation that empowers local government. And I think what we've seen is a stranglehold from the state house. In the mechanisms and the levers that local governments can pull. We've diverted so much of the actions that local government can take to property taxes in trying to drive revenue generation for their locales. And this does a handful of things. It erodes trust between your local government and between the residents that live in your area. It uh, can drive people out of the area if they're feeling that pressure too much. It destabilizes the community ties that live there. And so I think when we look to the state house for what we can actually do, we need to empower these empower growing locales specifically by putting in legislation that redirects services, that redirects state house funds, that redirects the infrastructure that we already have to go to these growing places to build them up as they're feeling the organic development that comes with population growth. And I don't think that exists. We see this again. That goes back to the free lunch comment that I made. Was like, we see growth as an opportunity to scrape off the top, to invest and take from that as if it was an apple that's grown from the tree, rather than something like, okay, we're getting an apple, let's give it food, let's water it, let's make sure we have sunlight. And so when I think about that, it's legislation that empower schools to hire more teachers, which means diverting funds from other places to invest in our school infrastructure. It's making sure that local governments have the services and expertise to empower to build up the road structures so that when uh, people move in, they're not like destroying roads and we're having to fix a problem after it's already occurred, rather than proactively measuring the investment we need to take uh, in relation to that growth that we're seeing naturally occur. And I just think, again, that the state house is so focused on other issues that really aren't important, that are about restriction rather than the empowerment of organic growth. And that extends all the way down from broad rights and autonomy to the investment in local infrastructure. It's all connected.
Talking about investments, property taxes are a top concern for homeowners across the district.
Mhm.
What changes, if any, would you support at the State House to give local governments relief without cutting the essential service?
Yeah, yeah. Property taxes aren't abstract, and they're the frontline impact to the residents. Uh, in District 15, but really across Indiana. And that's something that I was kind of touching on before is like we have given the decision making to local governments for that primary lever to be property taxes in terms of revenue generation. What this does is it's raising our mortgage payments without seeing material changes in people's day to day, right? Okay, I'm paying more, but what am I getting out of it? Couple that with people on fixed incomes, retirees, vets that live off of disability and military pension. They're getting priced out of homes that they've lived in for decades. Parkview runs a homeless outreach program, and they have a representative at the library downtown every Monday. I want to say it's at 11. Don't hold me to that. I'll double check. But I went there and I spoke with them, and one of the things that they said was the population that's growing the most in terms of unhoused people are seniors because they're getting priced out of homes that they have historically paid for on fixed incomes because their income is getting basically strangled, coupled with the fact that property taxes are increasing their mortgage payments. It's disappointing to see this in Fort Wayne when it is a problem that we should be able to easily solve. But that extends from state house decision making. On top of this, working families are having to do more with less because wages have stagnated. When costs go up, and your pay doesn't increase, it's effectively a pay decrease. And so all of this together, by design, the main mechanisms of revenue generation have been placed onto property taxes for local governments. And again, it does several things, right? It erodes trust. It squeezes an already struggling working class in Indiana that feels these stresses. And these bills go up again because the state pushes the cost down to the people. It's a no-win situation. Um, Local officials are blamed. Homeowners feel the rising prices. Long-term planning is unstable. Uh, Larger homelessness populations, unhoused populations, excuse me, means less property taxes. Less property taxes means less funding. So it's this constant feedback loop of poor investments resulting in worse revenue generation, resulting in poor decision making, and it continues without significant intervention. And I think that that's what we're missing from the State House is an honest account of the issues that we're seeing resulting from their legislation. So how do we fix that? We need to provide relief without service cuts. That comes from the State House. The state should take more responsibility for the funding of core services and empower the local governments to be more flexible in terms of the taxes that they place on their residents. Flexibility in rate structure. Maybe that looks like offloading property taxes onto more local sales tax options. Maybe that looks like impact fees for new development. You want to play here, you have to pay here. I think there's a lot of mechanisms that the state house hasn't considered because we've relied so hard on property taxes. We need to end the habit of imposing these tax mandates on the residents without actually paying for them. So, like, stop forcing local government to increase property taxes to pay for the mismanagement of the General Assembly.
District 15 includes multiple school systems facing teacher shortages and rising costs. How would you advocate for fair school funding while pushing back against policies that drain resources into vouchers?
Yeah, private school vouchers, right? Listen, one of the people on my campaign team is a teacher here in Indiana, and I have heard firsthand the stories of how difficult it is to be a teacher in this environment. Uh, Across the state, there's something like 6,000 teachers that are in positions that they're not fully qualified for. Um, I'm trying to remember the number. I think it's 2,000 open positions, um, again, across the state of Indiana, which obviously impacts District 15. The schools are stretched thin. We're missing teachers. Class sizes are larger. There's fewer electives because there's less teachers. There's rotating substitutes because of instability. Like, teachers feel this in terms of of stagnant pay, which I think obviously goes across all positions of employment across Indiana. Um, they have rising workloads. There's constant churn, and so this destabilization extends from the classroom to the bedroom, to the homes of their students that they're trying to take care of. Look, I'll call it like it is. Indiana's expanded voucher program, it's not about access. It's about defunding public schools. And I think we need to be honest about that. The state house has embedded legislation that takes public dollars to invest in private schools where it shouldn't be. It is public disinvestment because they're investing in the private schools. The consequences of this are massive, right? You have public schools losing their predictive funding, their long-term planning, much like property taxes and development in Huntertown. You have districts that can't plan to retain teachers. You have teacher paywalls, you have weakening schools, and then you have obviously the impacts of that to your development of your children's educational children's education. You're not creating any incentive structure to bring and maintain a body of teachers that actually want to invest in the children here in Indiana. It's this constant feedback loop, and I think that's probably going to be the theme of the day, is feedback, negative feedback loops that impact our population in poor ways because of the lack of leadership from the General Assembly. On this specific topic, I oppose vouchers, full stop. And I think that's where most of the damage is occurring in terms of public schooling. You want to send your children to private school? By all means. That is your decision. It is also your responsibility to pay for it. Public dollars should not go to private schools. They should go to public schools. They should go to public teachers. They should go to public obligations in the district you are in. We should not subsidize opt-outs of public schools for the public good. I don't know. Like it's a simple solution, which is why this is so impactful, I think, because it just should not be that way. And it takes the state house creating legislation to pivot away from the voucher program that they created.
Northeast Fort Wayne has major employers, but many workers still struggle with wages and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
What does economic development mean to you beyond ribbon cuttings and tax abatements?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the difference between Huntertown and Fort Wayne, right? Because you have Huntertown is growing and they're seeing pains because of that. Then you have Fort Wayne that has like it's sustainable in quotes, but like continued uh, economic development, but they're also feeling the pain. They're different issues because of the different circumstances, but it's not one size fits all. It's not perfect because it's different. They come with their own baggage. And so Northeast Fort Wayne is full of major employers, but the harm still exists, right? And so a lot of that comes from wages that don't keep up. It comes from being stuck with weak benefits, and juggling multiple jobs and the gig economy that we've created, right? Not to mention the weakened union rights. I'm fortunate enough to work for a union, but many Hoosiers aren't, and they don't feel the power that comes with that. That's going to be a huge piece of what I'm trying to do in the General Assembly. So what does this cause, right? The Indiana model of economic development has been shallow by design. I think that both the state house and local governments, I want to stress this because I see this in Fort Wayne as well, have chased numbers instead of sustainability, right? We count jobs created as this ultimate metric of economic development, but it's not sustainable. It's a constant burn and churn that we can again relate back to our school infrastructure and the way that we treat our teachers and so many other like positions beyond that. But I think that is what immediately comes to mind. We see the churn and burn of teachers, and we can immediately relate that to the failures of economic development. We're judging development by the wrong parameters. And so what this does is it echoes, I think, the same macroeconomic environment that we're in, where we value short-term profit returns over long-term investment and long-term sustainability, right? Everything has to be run like a business, except the businesses that are being run are so concerned with the shareholders' ROI in the next quarterly report rather than actually creating a mechanism, a body of self-sustaining economic development planning that should exist. And it doesn't. It's a concrete disconnect, right, from the residents in District 15 and the General Assembly, where employers are getting incentives, where local governments are getting their photo ops, and the workers get screwed. The proletariat gets left behind in low wages and in rising costs. Couple that with a lack of representation without strong unions and strong union legislation embedded into the Indiana code, as well as weak benefits. Like, how is anybody supposed to live the American dream that we were all taught as children in this economic volatility in America in 2026? So when you ask me what does economic development mean to me, it is that long-term planning. It is counting the wins and the metrics that we use to judge development by the sustainable improvement to the lives of the working class. Everything else is window dressing. What does this mean? It means keeping up. It means wages that keep up with the cost of living. It means benefits to cover healthcare, so you're not having to choose whether or not I go to the doctor or whether or not I eat. It means predictable schedules so that you can embed childcare into the reality of your life. It means pathways to career investment so that we can actually retain the investment that we made into education and our workforce here in Indiana rather than seeing them leave across state lines. This only comes with accountability from the state house. We must change the incentive structure where public support is attached to superficial numbers that don't mean anything. We need to attach it to wage standards. We need to attach it to benefit quality. We need to attach it to local hiring and retention standards that match the metrics that are best in the nation. Why are we not competing against our neighboring states? We should create an Indiana where people want to come. This is how we do that. That's long-term community investment. You need to reward the companies that actually raise the floor and the ceiling instead of just growth for growth's sake, because it's not sustainable. But yeah, and raise the minimum wage.
Between rising rents in Fort Wayne and higher prices for homes in Huntertown, affordability is tightening. What state level policies could realistically help young families, seniors, and first time homeowners?
I've seen both sides of this as a prior homeowner, as a current renter, what it comes down to is affordability. Housing should be affordable. It should not be an asset. It should not be counted as an investment. It should be a piece of core infrastructure that is provided to the people. This is the richest country in the history of the human race, and we can't afford to house everybody. I disagree with that fundamentally. And so what does this mean, right? Like it 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 should be affordable is a great platitude to have, but alongside that you have to be realistic about what you can do in the legislation. So where does the system break? It breaks at the state level. We restrict what kinds of housing can be built. We block cities from basic renter protections. We have no tenant union protection in the Indiana code. We let investors outcompete residents, again because we have given so much power to shareholder returns rather than investing in the workforce. This and then I don't even think Indiana offers any, if at all, it's weak, first-time home buyer incentives. And so what we've done is we created a market where we are technically players, but it doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for the people who actually live in and create the market. And so we need to, what I think that the General Assembly should do, what I will do as District 15 senator, we limit price hikes by rewarding landlords to keep rent stable in terms of renters, right? We empower unions we empower tenant unions with, again, Indiana code embedded legislation that actually empowers your renters. You stop, again, this goes back to the earlier question on property taxes. Once we divert some of the mechanisms for revenue generation away from property taxes, that lowers property taxes, and we can stabilize our housing, rampant housing cost increase from moving away from our focus on property taxes is the only way we can drive revenue. um, and then we need to talk and do something about the investor acquisition of homes. The market is being dominated again because we treat housing as an investment rather than a piece of that core infrastructure. It's not a luxury. Housing should not be a luxury. It is literally the foundation of stability.
Indiana continues to rank poorly in healthcare outcomes. How would you work to improve Indiana access to affordable care in Allen County, especially for working families who fall through the cracks?
Yeah, healthcare in Indiana sucks. It's just point blank. We spend, I I was reading a report. I think it was Indiana spends Indiana expenditures on healthcare rank fourth in the nation from a statewide perspective, and yet we consistently rank like in the bottom for the outcomes. And so it's just it's a complete, it's a dichotomy between what we're investing in and what we're seeing. So where's the loss in that? Well, we still see, working families again choosing whether or not to see their doctor or whether or not to pay their ever increasing utility bills. Thank you, data centers. Jobs no longer guarantee access, right? Even though our healthcare is immediately tied to our employment, it doesn't mean that we're getting the care that we need. Um, State policy has created so many coverage gaps where you make too much for Medicaid. Not even going to touch on the federal impacts of Medicaid, I know, but we've created this gap between where you can get Medicaid versus now you make too much for Medicaid, but you make nowhere near enough for actual quality private insurance, right? My goodness, there's so many impacts and so many causes for this. But again, what we see in District 15 is weakened access to necessary care for so many different populations that live here. It's like, again, it's the stresses to the roads in Huntertown where we didn't invest in them. Now we see this population growth and our roads are getting destroyed. You have preventable conditions and people become emergencies because we didn't take proactive preventative care in the beginning, because we didn't invest in that, because we waited for it to become an emergency, and now we're having to pay more to fix a problem that's impacting more people with a higher rate of detriment. It's mismanagement from the General Assembly, from your senators, from your representation. This also feeds into emergency rooms being used as primary care because I need to get seen now. What does that do? That drives costs up. Hospitals absorb uncompensated care costs because of all this. We have families that end up in bankruptcy because of routine visits, again, that we haven't invested preventative care into. I have met with there's a precinct chair out here that has he worked at Parkview and his wife still works at Parkview, and Parkview bankrupted them. How is that the reality of residents in District 15? And that is one story. It just shouldn't be that way on so many levels. And so I, the actions that we can take as a General Assembly, I want to push. I have advocated and posted within my platform on my website that we as a state should take lessons from the current administration of the federal government in pushing the boundaries of our power And what I want to see, what I want to put into practice is a hybrid role of statewide universal health care. If the feds won't come to save Indiana, then we will do it ourselves. I think that is the Hoosier mentality that exists. And it's clear that we need that kind of overhaul and investment in our healthcare system as it stands. Outside of that, I want to see expanded Medicaid eligibility. I want to see an improved waiver process. Again, I've spoken with many people who work through that process and have encountered all the points of friction that exist within the waiver process, and it's just bureaucratic friction applied to families, to the working class, to children that need care and aren't getting it. We need to revoke tax advantages from healthcare systems, hospital systems that price gouge and restrict community access, that aren't investing in rural healthcare hospital extensions that provide access to our rural residents. Um, Again, I'm going to point to the federal government because I think that what they have shown is they can push the boundaries of what we take as a norm. We can still take lessons from that. The the Trump RX model of nationalizing prescription drug access, I think, is actually a really good idea. What if we were able to do that from the state? We collectively invest in bulk purchasing from the state house. We create a mechanism where we give access to all Hoosiers for the drugs that they need. We lower the costs, we provide state authority, and we actually materialistically improve that process of acquiring the medications that you need to live a better life. That's amazing. Um, I think coupled with this is also we need to invest in, as I talk about rural access, it's not just enough to build and invest in hospital systems outside of city lines. We also need to improve the transportation and invest in transportation for those rural patients to actually have real access. And so the standard of healthcare in Indiana needs to be raised. It needs to be considered as a basic responsibility, as a basic infrastructure, as a as the commodity mindset from the General Assembly rather than a token mechanism from which to apply their politicized views to. Indiana fails that responsibility through deliberate policy actions from our current representation.
Did you just praise Trump?
I think that if anything, Trump has again pushed the boundaries of what we consider as our norms. The Congress has a lot of work to do in applying legislation that cover the gaps that he has exposed, that his administration has exposed. But I do think that socializing certain aspects of our national and state infrastructure are unanimously good ideas.
Residents often complain that state priorities don't match local needs. How do you ensure that District 15 gets its fair share of transportation funding and attention?
Yeah, I think, again, back to that rural access, we have to invest in it. District 15 specifically, I mean, look at some of the bills going through the state house right now, right? Like we're dealing with a representation that wants to focus on everything but what is materialistically relevant to the day-to-day aspects of what you see as a Hoosier, as a resident in District 15. We deal with roads. We drive on the roads. We all, I mean, well, no, I shouldn't say that. Most of us have to have access to a vehicle to get anywhere across District 15. People work, children have to go to school. And so what they see is unsafe intersections. They see deteriorating roads. They see limited public transit options. My goodness. And to bring it back to Huntertown, you see infrastructure not keeping up with the growth, the organic growth. And so it's this illogical cap on organic growth, which is again mismanagement. And so I hear Jon Stewart comment all the time that people want to see the value of their tax dollars. What am I investing in? What does that look like in my day to day? And why are we not being transparent about that as a General Assembly, as your representation? And so, like, transportation funding in Indiana is driven both by the decision making of, like, the General Assembly through political leverage because it is centralized in the state house, but then also coupled with NDOT. And so the relationship between the two of them, between those two bodies, is heavily political. And those who haven't invested in that relationship truthfully get deprioritized. And I think we're seeing that deprioritization in District 15, where our local roads are falling behind, where our commute times increase, where our our safety risks, our safety is impacted by the decision making of the state house. And so once again, we're forced to patch problems that exist after the fact rather than prioritizing preventative care. And that mismatch is eroding trust in the voting bloc that put Liz Brown in the General Assembly, because she's not prioritizing transportation funding through her lack of attention. And so what we need to do is be transparent about the needs of transportation. Wild concept, and having discussions with the people that actually live here in terms of understanding what they need and what they see. We need to prioritize safety. We need to prioritize maintenance. We need to prioritize the usage of the prioritize the roads that are being used more, and do this from an unbiased perspective rather than bringing in this heavily politicized influence into something as, again, as basic as our road infrastructure, and actively coordinate the funds between the state and the feds down to our local governments to empower them to make the decisions that they can make in their local communities. That's accountability. That is decisions made in public based on the reality of local communities.
If elected as a Democrat in a Republican dominated legislature, how would you balance working across the aisle with holding the supermajority accountable when policies hurt your district?
Yeah, I think we're seeing this across the state, right? It's not just District 15, but as we touched on, District 15 is a large piece of this lack of accountability from the current supermajority. Residents watch bad policy pass while the opposition says that they don't have the votes. And that might be true, but it's, again, it goes back to that it is the opposite side of the coin of our quick wins and looking at uh employment numbers. Oh, I didn't have the votes, so that's it. That's not good enough. And I think that this superficiality of leadership that we're seeing from our state house has resulted in in submission almost. Um, this super majority faces little to no accountability. It faces no pressure to listen. I understand that. I I I think that working across the aisle does mean some level of compromise, but it also means publicly dissenting when you disagree with what's happening. It also means embedding transparency into the decision making that's happening. It means advocating to the public of what your voice was in the conversations that are being had within the state house where residents don't have access. I think that we have, again, played this game of marketing for politics' sake, and it's destroying the trust that Hoosiers have in their state house. My goodness, talk to any young person and all they feel is apathy and distrust with the entire election system. We have done that. Our representation has done that. The people that you and I have voted in have caused that. I have worked with people that think differently than me many a time. I think back to when I was working COVID as a counterintelligence lead for the Army. You know, one of the people directly on my team that I worked the most with was a conservative Trump voter, albeit not completely MAGA. And I think back to him because he and I were so uh, not just opposed, but open to like discussions. We definitely had many a talk where we talked about our differences and still chose to move forward because of that. And I think that that was because we had a common goal. We're both trying to build a body of reporting in response to an international, a global event, right? That we're both seeing. And so we're both invested in the same win, the same outcome, the same mission. And I think so much of our political representation has become entirely disinvested from where they should be. It's no longer about the representation. It is about themselves. It is about their own enrichment. It is about their pockets. It is about their political career rather than the people that elected them to serve them. And I think only once we redirect that mindset back to we serve the public, not the public serves us, can we restructure the way that we attack our service through the General Assembly because now we're both focused on the same mission. I think a piece of that is naive and unlikely to return. And so, alongside this, you also got to be able to sell. You have to know what the motivation is from the person that you need to persuade to change their decision. And I think that again, to hold our own accountable, Democrats come in with a holier than thou mindset often and think my way is right, yours is wrong. And so I'm not even going to have that conversation to understand where you're coming from. That's a flawed way to approach representation in anywhere, especially the state house, especially the General Assembly. Because if you can't understand why a person, why an elected official is making the decisions that they're making, there is no way that you can then counter that with trying to get them to change their mind, to support your bill, to support a different mode of action. And so this cooperation has to be a tool. It doesn't have to be surrender. It doesn't mean bending the knee. It means reminding yourself that you work for the people that you serve.
Finally, why you? Why now? I mean, that's the most basic way I could put it.
Yeah.
What happens to Fort Wayne and Huntertown if leadership doesn't change?
Conservation of the momentum that we see. If if it doesn't change, we will have the same can kicks down the road. It is the lack of long-term decision making. It's a lack of investment into the proper planning, the proper funding techniques, the proper levers to be pulled to actually empower the people that live here in District 15. And so why me? Because I am you. I grew up here. I went through Northwest Allen County schools. I graduated from Carroll. I took the EMT course down at Anthis downtown. I am connected to so many different organizations throughout Fort Wayne. I mentioned I delivered newspapers up to the county line. I run a program at Fort Wayne Pride. I am invested in vets organizations here. I'm connected with the VA. Like I am you. I am a renter here. I have my family here, and I think that the decisions that I will make as the senator for District 15 impact me as well. Like I get it. I I go to Parkview. I work down Southwest at BAE. I'm part of my local union. Like I am the exact working class that I am trying to advocate for because that is who we are. When I say I'm a proud Hoosier, I don't just say that for the platitude. Yes, I left. I left Indiana to serve my country. I went and got an education. I worked in a smattering of different things and I chose to come back. This is my home. You all are my people, and I feel that you have been misrepresented. That is why now. That is why me. That is why I'm here to bring a sense of actual leadership rather than tenureship to the General Assembly for District 15.
We've talked about policy, priorities, and what's broken. Now it's time to find out where you stand when there's no room to hedge.
Mm.
This is hold 'em or fold 'em. I'm going to read a statement. You're going to tell me whether you hold them, yes, or fold them, no. No filibusters, no footnotes. If you want to explain, you'll get 10 seconds. Let's go. Property tax caps should be reworked if they are starving schools and local services in fast growing areas like Huntertown.
Hold them.
Public dollars should go to public schools, not private voucher programs draining resources from Fort Wayne classrooms.
Hold them.
Indiana should raise the minimum wage because working full time should cover rent in Northeast Fort Wayne.
Hold them.
Local governments should have more control over zoning to address housing shortages instead of a one size fits all state mandate.
Hold them tightly.
Healthcare decisions should stay between patients and doctors, not politicians in the state house.
Hold them.
State economic development incentives should require strong local hiring and wage standards, not just tax breaks.
Hold them.
Indiana should invest more in public transit and road maintenance in Allen County, even if it means shifting state priorities.
Hold them.
Teachers deserve collective bargaining protections and competitive pay to stop the educator exodus.
Absolutely hold them.
Culture war legislation has distracted the General Assembly from real affordability issues facing this district.
Absolutely hold them.
After years of the same leadership, Senate District 15 needs a change.
Hold them.
Thank you for coming on the show and taking the time to speak directly to the people of Northeast Fort Wayne and Huntertown. I know running for office isn't easy, and putting your ideas, your record, and yourself out there takes a real commitment. Conversations like this matter because democracy doesn't work when voters only hear talking points. It works when candidates are willing to sit down, answer tough questions, and explain how their vision actually connects to everyday life in the district they want to actually represent. To everyone watching and listening, this race matters. Indiana Senate District 15 isn't just a dot on the map. It's families, workers, students, retirees, and communities that deserve leaders who show up, listen, and fight for them. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.